We are going to start with communication skills. This is actually Unit 1, the first topic. And today I'm just going to talk to you about how effective communication should be. What do you think is communication? Can you tell me, students, what communication is all about? Yes, very good. The answer is, it is passing of information from one person to another person. It could also be called as transfer of information from one place to another place. So communication basically is nothing but sending and receiving information between two or more people. The person sending the message is referred to as the sender, while the person receiving the message or the information is called the receiver. The information can include ideas, concepts, opinions, beliefs, attitudes, instructions, and even emotions. The word communication comes from the Latin word. It comes from the Latin word communis. And what is communis? It is nothing but to share. So, as I had already pointed out, it is nothing but sharing of information. And this sharing includes verbal, non-verbal, electronic means of human interaction. Communication skills, being able to communicate effectively, is one of the most important life skills. Now, you must have started speaking your own language when you were hardly 3 years old. So it was like, for example, nobody taught you the language. It was just that by watching, by listening, by practicing, at 3 you were good enough to speak your own mother tongue. But sometimes it becomes a little difficult with us, with 15 years of schooling also, to speak well in English. But now you know that communication skill in English especially has become very important, because all your placements or the placement drives that are going to come up in the campus, and when you are going to attend it, then the communication has to happen only in English. So it's right time for you now in your 3.1 and 2 semesters to start practicing well. So now coming back to the topic, coming back to business, what are the types of communication? There are 3 basic types of or methods of communication. The first one being verbal communication. What is verbal communication? It is oral communication, passing on from one person to another person orally. And then you have face-to-face talking, just like how it could be a dialogue, or it could be like we just keep talking with friends. It could be anything. Or it could be in a classroom where the teacher, like what I'm doing now, where the teacher is teaching and you sit and listen. Or even watching a television program or watching a film also could be some kind of communication. Of course, you are always at the receiving end. Written communication. Now, written communication is something that is a little more formal. So, you can always use your alphabets, right? And the use of symbols that are understood by both the sender and the receiver of the message. So you are engaged in written communication. And then comes, and also written communication could be in the form of emails or even writing of letters or any kind of manuscript or even transcript. These are all written communication. These days everything is done via email, right? And yeah, the third one being body language. Now, body language is a non-verbal communication, but equally important in sending messages. You can often tell tell if your boss or your teacher or anybody whom you're talking with is really upset, or probably no, he's okay, just by their facial expression, postures, gestures. For example, a flushed face, a face which is very flushed, means that the person is embarrassed. A clenched fist may indicate anger, and the rolling of one's eyes, like how most of y'all you keep doing when I say what happened in the last class, this is what I taught, you keep rolling your eyes in disbelief. Okay, so these are all nothing but non-verbal communication. Now we know that there is one particular method. It has communication, a particular method. Communication has 6 different elements involved. So now let us look at the 6 elements or the components of communication. For example, the first one being the context. Now, why do you want to send this message? Why do you want to share this information? And then you are going to be the sender. When you are the sender, then you become the encoder, right? To use the technical language, you call that person an encoder. And then you have the real message coming up, right? How the message is going to be sent across. So the message. And what is the medium that you choose to send this information from one person to another person? Okay, so now we know why we have to send it. You are the sender, and then you have the message, and then you have the medium which you have chosen. Now what could be the medium? Whether via email, or you're going to write a letter to that person, or perhaps you are going to have a face-to-face conversation, or probably a one-to-one interview, anything maybe, or maybe in a class, you're going to deliver a seminar or a lecture. And then there is the most important part coming up, the receiver, who would also be called as a decoder, if I have to use the technical language. And then finally comes the most important thing, feedback. Now, you are not very happy when any kind of feedback is given to you. For example, when you write your exams, what do the teachers do? The teachers always, right, after the papers are marked, corrected, then the teachers always give back the papers. And they always say, come on, right, you have done well, you have not done well, you need to improve. And you need to cherish this kind of feedback. Whenever you pass on something, right, whether it has reached the other person, whether the person has understood, and whether the person gets back to you is something very important. Only then the communication becomes complete. For example, what is context? Context is, it could be, one aspect is country, culture, organization. Every organization, culture, country communicate information in their own way. Each of us have, each country, all of us have our own way of doing it. Okay, and then it is more of, okay, now coming to the next one, it is the sender. Encoder is the person who sends the message. In oral communication, the encoder is the speaker, and in written communication, the writer is the encoder. But there is always an audience. And then you have the message. What message do you want to pass on to the receiver? What is going to be exchanged between the sender and the receiver? And the context could be anything. As already we discussed earlier, it could be face-to-face kind of a conversation that's going to happen, or maybe you're going to write it, or probably, any kind of information that you want to pass on. So, the next one is medium. How are you going to do it? In what way should it go? Earlier, a medium, when we used to write, now writing letters and sending those kind of letters and all has become totally outdated. At a point of time, the postman was the medium. But now, we have that so-called electronic device just in our pocket, or probably we have it as in the form of a laptop, or we have it in the form of a personal computer wherein we send the message. So that could be a written message, right? And you also have the receiver. Receiver could also be the audience. If it is a lecture, then it is the audience, okay? And then finally, the decoder, as we had already discussed. I told you about the 6 components of communication. And then finally, we have the feedback. Feedback may be in written form or in oral message, which actually tells you what the other person has felt. Now, the receiver can always, he cannot be at the receiving end always, right? And you also need to know what exactly the receiver thinks. So, feedback actually completes the loop of communication. It just goes on. So, when I write to you, you write back to me. And then again, if there is a query, I answer. And then if you are satisfied, you come back to me again. So, this feedback is something that should always be cherished. Something that we should always encourage. Okay, now coming to the importance of verbal communication. Why is this verbal communication so very important? Keeping each other informed. We can use verbal communication to disseminate useful and important kind of information. Yes, what is useful, we can always have it, and what we think is not really useful, we can always put it aside. Asking for help and support. See, there's a small proverb that goes, only a crying child will get milk. So only when you ask for support, only when you open your mouth and speak, right, you will get whatever you want. Only a crying child gets its milk. So if you want your problems to be solved, you cannot just keep quiet, you have to speak. And then also making friends, social network, right? Either by way of, when you came here into the MITS campus, you were all by yourself, right? Or probably 2 or 3 friends. But now you have a whole classroom of friends. Now, how did this happen? This happened only by communication, right? So it builds relationship. Our social network just keeps growing and growing. It moves on. And then you also have, you can also express very creatively. There are so many ways in which you can do it. Sometimes through our imagination, we can always improve our communication in a very creative manner. And then finally, sharing of emotions. As I told you, non-verbal language also becomes part of communication. So sharing through factual emotions, through factual information you can share emotions, or you could always do it through verbal or non-verbal communication. What are the types of verbal communication? We had discussed it earlier. So now I'm just moving on a little to non-verbal communication. The non-verbal communication, I'm just going to going to give you a small glimpse of what non-verbal communication is all about. Non-verbal communication is the process of conveying meaning, without the use of words, either written or spoken. In other words, any communication can happen between 2 people or 2 or more people through the use of facial expression, hand movements, body language, postures, gestures. It is called as non-verbal communication. And non-verbal communication, the first aspect of non-verbal communication could be facial expression. Your face can express millions of emotions and can readily be understood by anyone. For example, a smile. They always say a smile takes a mile. A smile can build relationship but a frown on the face can always break any relationship. It's just a facial gesture which can tell you whether you have built a relationship or broken a relationship altogether. And gestures differ from country to country. For example, in our country, you find that the first gesture, even before the word comes out of the mouth as namaste, we put our hands together. And that is one gesture which says that we are greeting another person. It's something which is very common in India. So that is also a good, kind of an expression with your hands as well as your face, a smile on your face. And then gestures, right? Gestures can express so many things. Most people, for example, now as I'm going through this lecture of communication,